Yeah. All right. So we are doing our 5-part series, and this is the 5th of that 5-part series around all of the different multiple conversations that drive business succession planning.
So we'll do a quick recap of the first 4, if such thing can exist.
Yeah.
And then an idea about what we'll talk about, family business conflict or governance. And it says presented by Melissa and Jeff. It's actually Joe and Shelley.
Oh, sorry.
Joe and Shelley.
That's
Shelley, as you know, Shelley's a financial advisor in her own right, no longer practices in that area, works with Treasury Mancini Founders Group and something called Free Suit. She's a partner there. And I'm Joe's Treasury. I'm a tax attorney. Southern California Institute, as you know, puts on over 200 programs a year on legal, financial, and tax technical, as long as 5 days and short as an hour. Founders Group is a value acceleration firm, as you see in EPI for that kind of work. We do the underlying work to prep the business for sale. And that's Treasury Mancini, the firm that started it all, helps successful families and business owners, A, get to the heart of how it matters, and B, resolve messes in 3 areas: integrated tax and estate planning, business succession planning from the legal side, and family governance counseling, which is family conflict we'll talk about today. This is our bias. You should always know the bias of your presenters before they present on how they get paid and where their focus is on what they do. We've covered 4 things: the anatomy of choice, that area before value acceleration to get the client from not knowing you to yes. We talked about the math around the problem, or the true math. Advanced tax strategies briefly, and then value acceleration. So in less than a couple of minutes, let's review those. The anatomy of choice is before the 3 gates. Can you show me the next part, Shell? If this is the value acceleration methodology, how do you get the client to yes? The anatomy of choice is about getting them to yes. Whether you're teaching a whole 50 or 500 business clients or potential clients in a group, or teaching advisors to help them understand how the client can help. What could you do? How could you have that conversation cause yes?
And I think
in our situation.
Oh,
I'm sorry. In our situation, if you go to the next slide, Shelley, we're suggesting that you have a conversation about the 5 limitations to progress, which we have in that longer presentation, to drive them to take an online survey. This survey we mentioned in each one of the prior ones. From that survey, then, when they take it, in the 5 or 10 minutes it takes them to take that survey, they go from, I think I've got all this handled, or yeah, to, oh my God, I'm not as clear as I thought. Oh my God, I'm not as clear as I thought. And then it produces a score overall and in 5 areas for them, and then gives them things to talk to you about, but you get a copy of it too to talk to them. Even if you cross 1 or 2 out because it wasn't right, you have a way to get underneath what's driving them. That's more than an even or bigger number conversation.
That's what I was going to say. This is really more about what's going on in their soul and in their gut. This is how you get a client to partner with you or a business owner to really see you differently.
The math we talked about, if you remember, you need some language that you can talk to people about where they say, yep, that's my problem. That's my problem, Shelley. The math we talked about, business owner says, I'm not going to sell because it's a math problem. I get X out of the business every year in salary plus Y in benefits for a total of Z every year. Joe, if I go to sell, I get my number, I get hit in due diligence, I get hit in the cost of sale, I get hit in taxes, I give the money to my financial advisor, they get 4, 6, or 8% return on my money, and I gotta tell you, Joe, it's not enough. I should just, I'm no longer gonna get X plus Y equals Z, I'm gonna get half to 2/3 of X every year. Hell, Joe, I'll just run it for 5 more years and then burn the damn thing. So how do you solve for it? Well, if you do tax planning and you do sale planning, where you make sure that during due diligence they don't get hit as much and reduce the income taxes, the bucket they get will be big enough to produce the income they need, as illustrated here. Next, please.
As long as I have a good advisor, right?
We're trying. These are the top 70% of legal, financial, and tax planning ideas to help reduce the cost that they're going to pay in taxes, to help them decrease future income taxes, to help them with asset protection, estate tax planning overall. It's about timing, combining, and sequencing for a business owner about to sell a business to handle it all. And of course, whether you use your process or somebody like ours, Where's the fork in the road? At that introductory visit, when you're meeting with them, which is after the initial client meeting, when do you decide you're going to use your own process? When do you partner with somebody else? And this is just a graphic to help you consider that. Fork in the road. Shelley talked a lot about value creation, which is, do you move the multiple, or do you move EBITDA, or do you move both? In this example, for a fairly small business worth about $4 million, it suddenly got worth close to $10 million, over double, by moving EBITDA, increasing gross revenue, decreasing expense, etc., and increasing the multiple by de-risking the business, which is where all the magic really lies. Next, please.
So
yes, ma'am.
One of the conversations that drives business succession planning a lot is the fact that there's a lot of family business conflict going on. And sometimes it can be an enhancement initiative like shown here. It can be a part of the 5 transition goals. So family business conflict, finding the alignment might be an enhancement initiative that results from starting with the assessments and the personal and financial assessments, or it could be that dealing with the family conflict then leads to business succession planning. We've had it happen both ways. So family business conflict is always, if you're dealing with a family business, it's always somewhere in there in the conversation about business succession planning, whether that's where it started or that's where it ends.
So on our co-passion platform, this is a graphic to simply show a client the trouble or friction that they're in now is not their fault. The dominoes were set a long time before. In both of these lines, traditional or co-passion, you're seeing that a family formulates the premise around a problem, both in step 1 on each one. In step 2 for both, they sought counsel. Here's where the difference came up. In traditional planning, they created tools for rules, legal documents that said, this is how it's supposed to be run. If it isn't, here's how to fight. Then when they encounter friction, they reach for their rules, and oddly enough, they go into conflict because the document told them to, as opposed to a document that could be an alignment set. So when they encounter friction, they find compassion and alignment, and then hope becomes a touchstone for resilience. So the dominoes that got set up before on these nasty documents, when they started to push over years ago, the last one that they're in conflict for is not the real problem. If they have a pen, each one of them at the table, they can change any document in the world, including irrevocable ones. There's ways to think through that.
Especially if you know a good attorney. So yeah. It's all about causing alignment before you create your documents, right? That's really the big difference here.
So we have a book called Hope is a Great Conversation to go over when the ease in the room just isn't there like it used to be. Whether they're to the point of toxicity or just not getting it done. The middle part is traditional governance. We're talking about what do you do before that to gain alignment before you start to create those documents.
So we do that through retreats. We cause alignment with families over 2-day retreats. Really,
and in those 2 days retreats, it's a matter of us being able to do that stuff that we talked about in the middle, eventually creating documents or creating alignment or creating their creed or whatever else it is, or the family constitution. But how do they find their alignment first? It's amazing to me how many families come in very toxic, and by the second morning are feeling much more aligned with each other, finding hope and saying, we can do this together. The next graphic is a simple way to show sometimes there's a misunderstanding. What number are you? In the role of owner, family, or business, which one are you? Most people don't understand that. If you go back one, Shelley, we had the husband of one of the daughters. The daughter had an interest in a trust that belonged to a limited partnership. The daughter had an interest in a trust that belonged to a limited partnership, and that limited partnership ran the business. Her husband believed he was a 7. Now, dad was willing to explain to his son-in-law, son, you're actually a 1. And hence, there was that, oh my gosh, is that why he's interfering so much because he thinks he's a 7? In fact, my daughter, who works in the business, is not even a 7 because she's not a direct owner. She's a beneficial owner lately. She's a 6. It's amazing how just understanding your role can shift. Why is somebody using the language they are? Next,
Yeah.
please.
So that's usually where we start. And these are some of the basics of family governance that we start with when we start those retreats, because, if we iron a little bit of that out right up front, it kind of helps the conversation go more smoothly.
The family assembly is everybody and their grandmother that belongs to this family that's supported by the money that comes through this business. The family counselor are the selected people from that group that say, we would like to have some input, although we don't have any vote. Then we have shareholders, the people actually own stock. In that daughter's case, she didn't own the stock, the trustee did. So that trustee was a shareholder, she was a beneficiary. And then we choose some people to run the business day to day, choose a CEO, and they run. So as you can see, there's all sorts of financial planning, estate planning, strategic planning, succession planning that gets done around those ideas.
I swear I'm not doing that. It's jumping on its own. Sorry.
I think you do it just to make my eyes.
I'm doing to mess with you. Yes.
It really creates family harmony and get high functioning. It ends up helping the business be more profitable because there's less arguments over things. For the people working in the business that are family, the people that are not family working in the business, and the family members that don't work in but want to have an influence. Whether the business is a real estate portfolio or an active manufacturing company, it's still a business.
The one thing I'll mention here, family governance is about developing it says family harmony, but it's about developing values, right? They really need some values to focus on together. And we're going to talk about that in a second. This is one of my favorite charts, and something that is a little bit eye-opening, especially when you're dealing with family business conflict, because often in that conflict, you have somebody that's a little too controlling. You have somebody who thinks they're in charge, right? And you're having a problem, whether that's a brother and the siblings, or whether that's the dad that won't get out of the way, or you have the hell on wheels mom, whatever it is, you've got somebody that's being too controlling. And if you use this chart to have the conversation that, look, you're limiting the value of your business by being too controlling. Might want to say that a little bit nicer, but that's the gist of the conversation. Who's doing what in the business? If it's the owner that's driving all of the vision and all the drive, attracting the customers and engaging the customers and supporting the team that's doing the admin work, if that owner is doing pretty much everything, they're still a stage 1 business. So in order to move through those stages of business, which becomes more valuable at each stage, that owner needs to get the heck out of their own way.
So as Shelley was saying, to say this in a way that owner feels good about it, you just simply ask them, which one's worth more? And they're going to say, well, it all depends. If the owner's in charge, they get more gross revenue and they keep expenses down. And I say, yes, you're having an EBITDA conversation. Can we have a multiple conversation?
Yeah.
If you can move the value of your business 10 or 20% by EBITDA, but you can move it 40, 50, 100% by multiple, which one would you play with? You say both. It's okay. You know how to do EBITDA. This deals with the multiple. Yes, I know you feel that if you're not in charge day to day, it'll have less EBITDA, but the multiple will skyrocket. And they look at you like, oh my God, I've been chasing the wrong problem.
Right.
I have been creating more net cash flow for me. I'm not concentrated on growing the value of the business. Alphas that are in the business love this. Spouses of the owners love this. Key managers, team members, because they see growth. They see value of business. They see that they're viable.
So it's a great conversation to have with a business owner. It's a great tool. This is what drives, this is how, well, I'll just bring this up. Do the questions really matter when you go into a 2-day retreat session? We're going to spend some time up front, but then we're going to have big brainstorming boards around the room. And this is to give the family members something to focus on together, right? These questions are about answering the questions together and coming to agreement on how to answer them. So, Joe, do the questions that we use, do they really matter?
It's a SWOT analysis plus 5. I know that we have to have something, like you said, to focus the conversation. In here, you can imagine the eternal weaknesses drive big, oh my God, we're concerned about these things. It's about the questions in between the questions to get families to talk about what's beneath it all.
Right.
You have to lay it between the lines. Next, please.
How do you actually?
It's getting to the heart of highly relevant matters. We say that at our law firm, getting to the heart of highly relevant matters. More often than not, if you were to ask a friend, a family member, or a client, what's going on, you're going to hear something like, nothing, I'm fine. Well, the reality is there's something under it. You might hear some complaints of symptoms or frustrations. She did that, he did this, I'm tired of this, I'm angry with that. Those are symptoms. What is driving underneath it? And there are ways in counseling to get to the source. So you're not dealing with symptoms, but you deal with the underlying cause, that when it releases, you watch people feel so relieved,
Oh my
cry,
God.
hug, just say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. As soon as they can blame a misunderstanding of fact or a misunderstanding of motive, they no longer blame each other, and there's a way to go. How to have that conversation, the next slide. People ask all the time, well, give me the questions to ask.
Yeah, always.
You learn this in kindergarten. Just like another sports analogy, the playbook is great until the ball gets snapped. In conversations and counseling with clients, it's about counterpunching. It's about noticing what that person across from you is doing and reacting to that. Not you deciding where that should go, but finding out what they're doing and counterpunching or blocking or maneuvering. That allows the conversation to get deeper rather than driving them to your prescribed answer. So we have what we call often positive sorting cards. We've got 3 different decks on this. One that deals with the excitement of where there's an opportunity. One that deals with why collaboration amongst advisors or with clients doesn't work often, and what are the things to consider to help it work. And then this deck that is a discussion deck. This is by no means one of those large financial institutions, kumbaya, let's talk about what money really means to you, hold hands. These are get down into the nitty gritty, down and dirty areas. The 6 areas of these cards are topic, compassion, give and receive, turf cards. Then we have discussion frames to continue the conversation and how do they contribute to each other. They end up doing what's called positive sorting. In the world of counseling, it's called negative sorting. We show the next, we'll show the topic cards and the next set. If somebody had to just choose 1 or 2, back one please, 1 or 2 of these to say, what are the topics we're talking about? There are even more cards than this, but they'd have to choose one and say, this is the topic we're talking about. Next slide, if you don't mind, Shel. And on compassion cards, they would have to choose 2 of these and discard the rest. By negative sorting out the ones it's not about, keeping the ones in front that it is, their mind starts to say, okay, this is the problem. This is the issue. So you're helping them get deeper without a day's worth of counseling. Just a way to get there sooner, that they're controlling what it is about them. Oddly enough, next set, as you do this again and again, and one more set, if Shelley and I both did this.
That was it.
If we both did this, and then we sat on opposite sides of the table, and she saw mine and I saw hers, we may just look down like many clients and go, oh my God, Shelley, I misunderstood how you're feeling completely. How could you think it's about this? It's really about that. And then you start having a deeper conversation. You could cause clients to use those words to form sentences and paragraphs to describe to another what's really going on. Can't tell you the number of times I've watched a lady look over and say, why have you never told me that before? Why have you never told me that before? And I've watched others look across and say, is that all you needed? Because there was a misunderstanding of fact or a misunderstanding of motive, either on their own motive or another. Next, please.
This is turf cards. We didn't talk about those yet.
Yeah, same thing on those.
Same, all about negatives, the positive sorting and having to choose. There's something about that and then seeing it from another person's point of view as well, or putting yourself in the position and choosing on their behalf and having to think like them. There's a lot of ways to use these cards that are really interesting. Tell us about this one though, Joe.
Sure. So on those first sets, those were combining words or negative sorting out and keeping a few to then form sentences, paragraphs to describe, or for Shelley to use my words and say it the way I feel. Ways to hear each other. We're now to the point of a discussion frame where, let's say, honor an elephant. I would ask Shelley to honor an elephant. She'd have to think in the background, think in the past, and say, here's the elephant in the room that I really want to honor. It's hard for everybody else. Or contribute a compliment to somebody that you're frustrated with. I really appreciate that. Just to say something nice or to honor something. The next one, though, is where we get really powerful for our last. And that is, as clients agree, they take these at random and they have to write out what they agree to do in the future. So let's say Shelley pulled or I pulled, I agree to shift. I would say to Shelley after going through this, Shelley, I agree to shift my thinking about when you walked in the room and I think you're upset about something because you don't say hi to me first, and it might be something that you have your mind on something else. Or I agree to shift my thinking that I've always thought that every time you come in on Monday, you're not going to be happy about it. I agree to shift my thinking about that because that's not you, it's me. It's just a way to give that nice gift to another person and to start the conversation in the right direction. Next, please. So this is that writing where they take a card. This is actually from a client meeting where all 6 participants wrote 3 cards apiece. One that they gave to another person, one that they kept, and one that they shared with the room. And these were all taped up on the window that they shared with each other. Now, watching people get up and walk over and give this card to somebody else and watch the emotion on the other side is magical and wonderful. Next, please.
So why do you make them write it themselves all 3 times?
Well, it's in the art of writing, especially if you cursive write, the art of writing, that it seats in your mind. Not like when I was in grade school where I wrote, well,
Right.
not, tease. Not that.
Did you do that a couple of times?
But when you write something out and that helps you refine in your mind, it seats in your short-term and long-term memory, and it helps you commit to another. Also, if it's in my handwriting, I give it to Shelley, although it would be hard to read, Shelley would say, you promised me. And there's a way for her to keep that. We have some clients, we walk in their home. These are framed. These are underneath the glass of their office. They're on a stand that they're very proud of. They're pretty paper. Next, please. So in review, I'm sorry, Shelley, you first.
No, you go ahead.
In review, it's about business succession planning and conflict. Does a chicken of the egg? Many a times, an advisor will ask us, what is the biggest tool you have for engaging large clients? And I would say it's about resolving family conflict. Because once you resolve family conflict, the rest of the planning they're willing to do with you, it no longer has a family feel like they're slugging through the mud, but just walking through easily. We talked about that co-passion platform. It's not the family's fault that they're arguing. They got set up for this years ago, either by documents or by misunderstanding or about misunderstanding motive or fact. All of that wasn't their fault. Once they realize it isn't, that they can blame the document, blame the misunderstanding of fact, blame the misunderstanding of motive for themselves or others, then they're able to see a new future. Next.
It's about finding that alignment, making sure they understand where they fit into the family, business, and ownership. They need to understand that sometimes that's what's driving the misunderstandings, right? They don't know where they fit in, especially if they're an in-law. So we've talked about a lot of stuff. If you've listened to this entire 5-part series, or you've listened to one piece or the other, this series is all about the multiple conversations that can drive business succession planning. You have to take the client as they come. You can't just dive right in and assume what's going to be important to that client and what's going to drive the business succession planning. It could be about understanding and understanding their situation better and driving more clarity. That's what the anatomy of choice is. It could be that they don't understand the math, that they're driven by that big number that's flashing at them, and they don't understand how that number is going to be depleted if they don't work on the business first. It's about that advanced tax strategy, speaking of the math. being able to zero in and reduce those taxes hugely affects the math. And by the way, is one of the biggest conversation drivers for business owners is making sure that you focus on the tax strategies. Understanding the value acceleration piece of business succession planning. What drives value in a business, and ensuring that you're focused on both the EBITDAs and the multiple and the initiatives that need to take place in the business. And then the family business conflict that we just talked about, and making sure that the family is aligned and causing the ability to move forward with all this additional planning.
So thank you guys so much. Look forward to seeing you at Summit. Give us a free if you need to talk with us as well. We're glad to be doing this. We're going to do this in more depth. Shelley, thank you for the time today and going back and forth.